So you're a triple threat, as I said at the top: acting, writing, producing. If we throw in directing, that's 4. Is there anything you can't do?
Yeah, boil an egg. really bad at. Oh, there's loads of things I can't do.
But how do you juggle it all? How do you prioritize it all?
Well, I try not to do too much of it all at once. Like there's a lot of shows that I just write and I'm not in, and there's a lot of shows I produce and I don't write and I'm not in. And then every so often a show will come along that I write and produce and I'm in, and then that's a nightmare. But and there's no way to juggle that. I found out. You just have to, like, you know, it's an endurance thing, and especially on Bad Sisters because that's hour long, and the first season was 10 episodes, and I mean I had a mouthful of ulcers at the end. But normally I'm used to the half-hour space, and you know, so that's, and especially in the UK, you get it all done in a really short shooting period, so 6 weeks and you're done. So it's not too long to sort of to juggle, but yeah, it's endurance.
How do you decide, given that you can take on all those different hats, what makes you say yes to a project, given that you can play all those different roles? How do you fit them all into a schedule?
Sorry, how do I what?
How do you prioritize those? Like, so when something comes your way, what makes you say yes to anyone? Given
money. Yeah.
Honesty.
No, it's not. I don't know what it is. There's just some projects just feel like it's better with another actor, and some projects. I mean, especially since I set up Merman, it's. You know, I mean, our job is to look for writers and nurture writers, and then, you know, my only job is to sort of, you know, sort of help them bring their idea to the screen. And so, I can step back from the writing there. And then, you know, something's come along and it just feels right. Like, I mean, with Catastrophe, that was always going to be, you know, that was Rob and I writing for ourselves. And then with Bad Sisters, you know, that made sense because I'm Irish.
What?
And I really wanted to do it. You know, I really wanted to play that big sister role. So, yeah, it kind of when I talk about it, it sounds more mental than it actually is. It sounds like it's you know, too much. But actually, when I'm in it, I'm just doing my job. You know.
And then what about when a script just comes along and it says, "Hey, we want you to play this part"?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, it's a weird thing, isn't it? It's clearly it's got to do with the script, but then it's the director, and then it's, you know, the people who you're going to be playing with, and then there's other factors like, you know, geography, and, so yeah, I don't do that many, things that I haven't, originated myself, you know, in some way. But yeah, it's usually, and it's like for fun, you know, you look at something like when I looked at the script for The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, I was like, well, that's just going to be a laugh, you know, and it was a laugh. From the first reading of it, watching Nick Cage in red leather. He'd sort of memorized the whole script from the very first table read. It was the most extraordinary thing ever. But, you know, so yeah, just sort of what I think might be fun. And then there is that thing of, I don't know if you feel the same, but if to try and do something different, because when you stick to the, you know, to the same thing all the time, there's a safety in it, but you don't learn enough from that. You know, it's much better to try something that is really out of your comfort zone. I'm sweating even talking about it, actually. But you know, it's really scary, but you really learn from it. So I just shot. I don't actually know what the official title of the series is going to be, but it's the Amanda Knox story where I'm playing her mom, and I mean, that was so different because it was a real person. Not that I had to do an impression in any way, but, you know, playing American and being in a real story, and, you know, is sort of a kind of completely different genre to what I'm used to. And so everything in me was like, sweating. But I thought it's good to do because it'll challenge me, and it's out of my comfort zone.
You'd never played a real person before, have you?
I mean, apparently I play myself a lot. No. I did a sketch show in the UK. I don't know how many of our weird little comedies make their way over here, but I did a sketch show called Psycho Bitches, where it was like famous women throughout history being interviewed, by a therapist, and so
Dr. Birnbaum is in. You're real.
So that was like Eva Perón and Frida Kahlo and the full gamut. But really, really over the top sort of impressions. It's worth looking for that, actually.
Internet, we're looking for you. Internet, we're ready.
Yeah, I had a monkey, everything. Yeah, it was great.
All right. So take me back to the beginning. Did you always know you wanted to be an actress? When did this start for you?
Yeah, I think I did. I come from a family of 5 siblings. So, well, I guess the thing of making people laugh, because I started in comedy and stayed in comedy for years, actually. That came from that, just sort of wanting the attention of my parents, who were, had plenty of other kids to be focusing on. And then I went to a convent school, run by nuns, obviously, and they were big into Gilbert and Sullivan, and so they used to every year put on a Gilbert and Sullivan opera. So that so that was my first sort of taste of it, being on stage, and I don't know that I knew immediately. But pretty soon after that, I went to art college. Actually, I didn't go to drama school, but I sort of funded this sort of weekend drama school that I would do on Saturday and Sunday. So I'd go to art school all week and then do drama school on Saturday and Sunday, and started working on Chekhov texts and that kind of thing, and I kind of thought, yeah, this could be for me. But the big thing that did it was I was in a car accident in Dublin, and it was a pretty rotten one, and I really messed up my arm, and it was like covered in bruises and stuff, and I was sitting in this cafe feeling really sorry for myself, and the director, Jim Sheridan, came over to me, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but he was saying, I'm casting this movie called The Field, and there's a gypsy girl in it. I think you look like you could play a gypsy girl. And so I went and I did the casting. He gave me his producer's details. What was his name? Noel Pearson. And I went and I did the audition, and I failed at it quite badly. I mean, I think
What happened?
Well, I just didn't. I didn't really know how to act. I mean, Gilbert and Sullivan aside, and my weekend acting school. I just didn't have any moves, and I'd certainly never done an audition before. That was the first time I'd done anything like that, and I just completely bottled it. But really weirdly, I left the room going, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
Like, how bizarre, because it wasn't good in any way.
Where did that confidence come from?
It wasn't a confidence at all. I mean, I had no confidence. I only got it a few weeks back. Well, no, seriously, like a couple of years ago. And it's not even that straightforward now, but no, it was just a thing. It was just like, I want to do this. And I kind of got into putting on plays, like plays above pubs. We've got a great sort of pub theatre culture in London. And so, you rent out these spaces and you take a punt and you lose loads of money, but, you get to perform and you invite agents along, and that's how I got started that way.
Did you end up taking more acting classes?
I did, actually. Yeah, I did another year-long part-time. I tried for all the drama schools. I didn't get in anywhere in Dublin or in London.
Take that.
Yeah, so I was
You're sorry now.
I was kind of devastated, but But, I thought I'm just going to keep going at it. But I did it in such a sort of half-arsed, non-committal way. And now that I've sort of had a bit of perspective on it, I realized that it was that thing of like, if I don't really try and go for it, then I haven't failed. Do you know what I mean? Like if I just sort of half do it, then, not even taking myself seriously, then no one can say, you haven't made it, because I was like, well, I haven't even tried. Right. And I think that stayed like that for a good few years until I started writing.
Was your family supportive of this?
No. they were, but you see, the thing is, I had like a proper job as well. I worked in the employment service in London in a job centre, finding people jobs. And because my dad had always instilled this thing in us of, to work hard, a proper work ethic. So, so I had a full-time job, and I did a sales job in the evenings, and I just felt like, well, if I've got money in the bank, then it won't annoy my dad too much. And but no, I think at a certain point they were like, piss or get off the pot. They were worried about me, and that I was sort of hanging on to this dream that was never going to happen. I mean, they wouldn't sort of say it in so many words, but my dad would keep reminding me of what a steady job I had at the job centre, and it was a terrible job. I mean, I didn't even know what my job was for about 2 years. I was just sort of sitting there, kind of putting pencils into beakers and moving a mouse around. I honestly didn't know what my job was. But I would do, I was doing acting classes in the evening, and I was doing things like, I did like an editing course, and then I did a touch typing course so I could write fast, and I did lots of things connected to the industry, weirdly, that have kind of ended up being something of a help. I did a storyboarding course. I was sort of, and then I started sort of going out and just filming things. Like I would just go out with a small group of friends. We would write these sketches, and then we would just go out and film them, and until we ended up with about half hour's worth of sketches that, we thought, well, maybe we can get proper agents this way. And yeah, that was my first like foot in the door to, get a proper agent and get working.
So what was the transition for you? What was the break for you?
I gave up my job because I went back to university because I dropped out of art college. And this is, I hope everyone's taking notes. This is exactly how not to do it. I dropped out of art college, moved to London, got a job in a job centre for 6.5 years. And and did some like nighttime courses and lots of different things. And then I went back to university because I thought I'm definitely not going to be able to be an actor, so I want to work in the industry in some way. So I went and I did English, and part of that was creative writing. So I started writing, and then I was waitressing to sort of support myself. I had a couple of waitressing jobs, and then I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do this, well, I had another accident. I fell off I was cycling home drunk, and I fell off my bike. Is anyone recording this? Okay. I broke my arm, and so I turned up from my waitressing job, and I hadn't realised that I'd broken my arm. So I was like trying to carry plates and just kind of flopping, and I was like, oh, I think I've done something really bad to my arm. And so I went to A&E, and they're like, you fractured your elbow. And so yeah, I gave up my job. I gave up my job, and I lived on my credit card. And I thought, this is my opportunity. I haven't got a job. Like, I've got no way of making money. This is how I'll do it. I'll just persevere. I'll keep going until I get something, and then after a couple of years, I got, I started working. I started getting work as a writer on some sketch shows, and started getting bit parts in other people's shows, and then eventually got bigger parts in other people's shows, and then eventually got my own sitcom.
Amazing. What would you consider your big break? Was it Pulling?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So tell us how Pulling came about.
Well, I was doing a sketch show with an amazing producer called Harry Thompson, and he made this amazing sketch show. If you can find it, it's called Monkey Dust. It's an animated sketch show. It's an amazing thing, really, really dark. Lots of great voice talent and animation talent and writing talent came up on that, and he loved myself and Dennis Kelly, who I wrote Pulling with, who's an incredible writer. We started writing on that sketch show for him, and he said, I think you've got something longer form in you, and so he gave us the title. He said, I think you should write a show about girls trying to get laid in London, and call it Pulling, because in the UK and in Ireland, pulling means when you go out and pick someone up,
Yes.
Casually dating them for the night. And
use your imagination. Got it.
But Dennis and I thought, well, that's a good title, but we don't want to just write a sort of sex show. We loved writing really filthy stuff, but we wanted to write about what we knew about, and what we knew about was struggling in London, doing a job that you've got no interest in disappointing relationships, never with everything that is constitutes a good life slightly out of reach. Mm-hmm. And we also lived in low level shared accommodation and with lunatics, so we thought we want to write about that, but there'll be pulling. It just won't be the main sort of focus. And at that point I'd done like a bunch of jobs, and I had gotten lucky. I think it was at a time when females in comedy were like panda bears, you're like, oh God, there's one. I hope it doesn't die. So I kind of got lucky in that I was one of the few sort of females that got, you're allowed, you can stay. And
we'll keep this panda.
Yeah. So I was, getting fairly good work in other people's comedy shows, but I just felt like, good female comedy roles weren't really there. And so that was a massive impetus as well to write the show and
to write your own characters.
Yes, to write really great female characters who, the fact that they were female, or even the fact that they were, looking for love, or, it was the least interesting thing about them or the show. They were just, human beings trying to get on, really flawed human beings trying to get on. And what was your question?
We're talking about pulling, but I want to go back. There is a theme to your work overall, like writing roles for yourself that you feel like you weren't seeing out there. Was Pulling kind of the first example of that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, in a lot of ways it was a great sort of, it sort of like opened the doors, I think, to the idea of that women could be very funny, and that it didn't have to be, the focus didn't have to be female stories, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like I said, it sort of didn't really matter what sex they were, but that it got attention for that reason, because it was like hard, funny, and women. And so it was sort of it was a really great start for me, but then after Pulling ended, we did 2 seasons and a special, then I didn't work for ages. Like I was over here making pilots, but they never got picked up. So I had this sort of 5-year period where I was like, oh wow, this is, I mean, I thought pulling was going to be the start of everything because we were, you know, BAFTA nominated and, you know, won a bunch of awards and the critics loved it and it was a really great show. But I was really not expecting to have the struggle that I had afterwards. It was scary.
How did you pull out of that? Not to.
Very good.
Sorry.
I don't know exactly how I pulled out of it. It took a while, but I remember a producer coming up to me at one of those sort of industry parties and going, oh God, what happened? And
that's helpful.
And it was, you know, like sort of blood draining from my face, sort of awful, like embarrassment, going, oh God, people noticed. So I had that. I mean, I had the impetus and I had the ambition, and I was, you know, I was working around the clock, and I was, like I said, making pilots and really, really trying to get something picked up. But what pulled me out of it was I got offered, you know, like you get offered sort of network deals when you write and create shows. This is like a good few years back. And so, you know, hopefully you get a pilot out of it. And if you don't, you like have another go, but you're sort of retained with an amount of money. And I was being offered another one of these network deals. And I thought, if I do that again, I think I'm going to keep going around in circles. And I'm not sure that what I want to do is make a comedy for, you know, one of the big networks. So I don't know that I have that kind of tone, really. You know, I was really trying to force it. But, you know, I didn't feel like I had those, you know, chops at the time. And so I said no. And I remember my husband at the time, now ex, just being like, you know, not happy. Because, you know, that's what we were, that was our income, you know. But I thought, no, I'm going to hold out. I'm going to wait and something's going to come along, you know. And then Rob Delaney contacted me on Twitter, and he had seen Pulling, and he got...
Shout out for Catastrophe. I know where the story's going. Sorry, spoiler alert.
Then he had been offered a script deal from the BBC, and he was like, yeah, great, thank you so much. I've never written anything before. So he reached out to me and he said, what do you think? Do you think we could, you know, try and write something together? And we did. And then the BBC didn't pick it up. We were like, oh, shit. And so we sent it to Channel 4 instead. And I remember going in for that meeting and they were, you know, I honestly thought it was just like dead in the water and that they wanted to talk to us about something else. But they were like, we were sent this script and we want to do it. And so, yeah, just went from there.
Talk about writing with a partner, because you've done it, obviously, did Pulling, you did it with Rob Delaney. What is that process like for you?
I was just talking to, I did this thing with Stephen Graham yesterday. He wrote Adolescence with Jack Thorne. And we were talking about it, about how, I mean, everyone has a different process. My one is to just sort of be really scared initially and, you know, sort of freeze and feel. I was the same with Dennis. You know, it took me a while to sort of loosen up and to not be scared to say something stupid or say something unfunny or uninteresting, because you've got to do all that before you get to the good, funny, interesting bit, you know. But it's sort of it's dependent on the partner. Like when I was writing with Dennis Kelly, he would do the keyboarding, and I would just, you know, bang out ideas and perform, and then we would sort of rewrite together. And, you know, it was extremely collaborative, but he kind of steered it, you know. And with Rob, I was the keyboard warrior in that one, but we would just riff together. And for the first season, we had no writer's assistant. It was just me and him. So I you know, sort of was writing everything down as it would come out of his mouth. And I think that's why we kind of hit the ground running with it, because it immediately just sounded like how people talk. It wasn't about how can we sort of craft this, how can we get these words out in a perfect way? We just it's what came out of our mouths and our brains. And it was really messy at first, and it took lots and lots of rewriting and redrafting and figuring out to get it to the place it ended up at. But once we lost that sort of fear of saying something stupid, you have to be vulnerable in your work, and then it becomes then it's a joy,
Do you also enjoy the process of writing for yourself, knowing that you're going to be playing the part that you're writing? Or is that harder?
I don't think it is harder. No, I really like it, actually. And it sort of, it makes the process of writing is kind of easier because you know exactly how you deliver something.
Mm-hmm.
And when Rob and I would work together, we would sort of, say lines out. We would say the whole thing out. We'd play all the characters in Catastrophe, and you're writing to your own voice. And so I think I find it a little bit. Or I used to find it a little bit easier. Now I kind of really enjoy writing other characters that I'm not playing, and then you've got that lovely thing of imagining who it could be or who, you hope it will be saying the words. Like you have your sort of, your sort of hopeful list of who you might sort of snag for the part.
Well, speaking of great people in Catastrophe, you had someone named Carrie Fisher.
Yes.
What was the experience like working with her? Got to give her a little shout out.
Oh, it was amazing. It was wonderful. I still can't believe that she's not with us. She did 3 seasons with us, and I've told the story a bunch, but she was presenting an award at some sort of do in London, and Rob and I were there, and I just turned to him and I went, "That's your mother." And so he was like, "Let me reach out to her on Twitter. I've got 1 million followers." So he did, and it went completely unanswered. And then we went the proper route and contacted her agent like normal people. And she said yes, and we were so floored. And when she turned up, we were shooting in this really cramped house in London. It was all location. And she turned up for her stuff, and we were like giddy like children and like following her around, really annoying, trying to be friends. But she just, I think she thought she was there for some sort of weird student film, because we don't have, well, not really. We don't really have craft services in UK or Ireland. You have a table with some biscuits, cookies, and some tea, and some really sort of like a dirty kind of plastic tablecloth. That's it. So and then she was just in this bedroom kind of waiting to do her bit. And then she would come out and just create Comedy Gold. And we realized after a bit that she was, she was just going to do whatever she wanted kind of thing. And we were so strict with everyone else on the show. We were like, no, I think I find this a full stop there, not a comma. And we were so specific in how we wanted it because we'd said it out loud for all these, a year that we took to write the first season. But with her, we were like, yeah, no, God, knock yourself out, whatever you want. But no, she ended up doing it as written, and then she would sort of embellish. And some of her embellishments were so amazing, they stayed in. And the second season was the same. She came in and she did it, and she did it brilliantly. But, she kind of was learning to trust us a little more, like if there was difficulties with lines or remembering or whatever it was, she could see that we were very much there for her and on her team. And we got to use her a little bit more. We got to have a bit more fun, because we got an extra day with her. And then by the third season, she was just like part of the gang, and we got really close. And started hanging outside of the the shoot, and I couldn't believe it. She was like sitting in my house in Hackney. Like she travelled out to Hackney, lads, in East London, with Gary, her dog, and
Carrie.
and yeah, and and we just, we just were just starting to really get to know each other, and actually, she invited me to come and have drinks with herself and Salman Rushdie, and I
As one does.
can't tell you how close I was to not going, because I thought that's just too intimidating. I can't deal with that. And so I said to her, I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, Salman Rushdie, I feel like, oh God, that's going to be tricky. He's so smart. She went, he's just going to talk about girls. And and it was true. And we had this gorgeous evening together. And I walked her to her room in the she was staying in the hotel there, and I remember her talking about the difficulties of sort of getting older. She was really open and honest about how she was sort of treated by the industry, in a way, because she was like, a loud, proud woman who just called out bullshit when she saw it, and she felt that came back to bite her, and but she loved acting, she loved it, and she wanted to do more, and she loved doing Catastrophe. And I mean, the last thing I remember saying to her before she went into her bedroom was, she was sort of, it was one of those hotels where there was just mirrors everywhere, and she was like catching her reflection, and she was talking about, getting older, and how difficult it was, and then she kind of caught sight of herself, and she goes, but I'm not doing too bad for a 60-year-old. And she, that she had like pride in herself at that moment, but the rest of the time she was, insecure. I don't want to say she was insecure, but she, like all of us in this industry, it's so focused on your looks and your age and your sex and your, your race, and you're up against so many things, and that was difficult. And anyway, it was like 2 days later, she was flying back to LA. And I remember my daughter was upstairs in her bedroom and with her friends. She came running downstairs and told me she'd heard it on the news.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, fuck. It really floored me. Because it just like, she definitely was, she'd just done the Star Wars movies, and, she really wanted to work, and to live. Jesus. But yeah, I'm so glad I got to, become friends and hang out with her, and I'm so glad we got to work with her. She was a genius.
What a gift.
Mm.
Rob's tweet really worked out.
Yes. Yeah, it really did.
Amazing. God, I don't even know how to follow that. Sorry. You often write from, where do you come up with your ideas? How much do you mine from your own personal experiences? How much can you take from your own life without your friends and family freaking out on you?
I used to take so much from my own life. I still do. Actually, I'm writing a thing which is basically my life. But what I used to do was take other people's stories. Like with Pulling, it was, the girls I lived with in that flat. One was a nurse, and one was a teacher, and one drank too much, and they were basically the characters in Pulling, and then men I met along the way, and women I had friendships with, and they all ended up in Pulling, and I didn't ask. and so I remember getting, emails out of the blue going, I recognized, I was watching TV the other night, and so I stopped doing that. Then I would, if I heard someone's story that I felt like was so specific and brilliant that I wanted to use it in a project, I would ask, and like, with divorce, when I was writing divorce, I wasn't divorced at that point, but my friend was and had gone through it, and so I kind of there's a lot of research is done, reading and all of that, but like getting real stories, direct from the horse's mouth kind of thing, I just thought were invaluable. So I would basically interview people who'd been through the thing my character was going through, and I was way more upfront about it, and and sometimes I would show scripts and sometimes like finished cuts, and so I mean the thing is that they're sort of inspirations for stories, and then sometimes lines go in, and then sometimes people go in, and but weirdly quite often the people who go in don't recognize it, because people don't really sort of see themselves, right, especially if you've written a flawed character. But with pulling, that was kind of my life at the time. I made a series called Motherland, which is all based around the sort of, the school gates and the friends that you meet when your kids, first go to school, and what a lifeline that is. It's about finding your tribe. That was all. I mean, I remember going into the school, like after the first series went out, and I was kind of like, oh God, I can't look at these parents. They know what I've done. And the same, with Catastrophe, it was, the character's sort of origin story of how they met was taken from my life, and there was elements taken from Rob's life, but that was sort of, I guess, the thing that sort of grounded it. And then as soon as it sort of formed a life of its own, a lot less was used from our actual lives. I mean, we would come in with stories like, of whatever terrible thing you'd done the week before, or whatever terrible thing had happened to you, and we tell those stories, and then we'd see if there was anything in it. But yeah, it's a helpful, useful thing, and even with Bad Sisters, it's so not my life, but I know how it feels to come from a big family, and I know I knew what I wanted that to look like on screen, and in the second season, what my character is going through in terms of menopause and grief, and so lots of elements, but used sparingly but really helpfully.
So good segue to talk about Bad Sisters. You set that up very nicely for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that was the first season, was an adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Had you done that before? Adapted someone else's idea for your own?
Well, I wrote and directed an episode of Modern Love, and that was an adaptation of one of the Modern Love stories.
The New York Times column.
Yeah, New York Times column. And I loved it, because you get given a story, and it's the bones of something, and then you get to create and develop around that. And so that, I know that's a different thing, but it definitely gave me a kind of confidence that I think I wouldn't have had before, because I've been brought books to adapt, and and things similar to Bad Sisters before, like a French show. We think this would make a great sort of English speaking remake, and I'd never been attracted to it before. But when Bad Sisters was brought to me, Jay Hunt at Apple just said, just watch the first episode and then get back to me. And so I watched one, and I was just in. It was so compelling, so dark and funny, and and about sisterhood and about family, and but I just thought I know how to make my version of that show. I love the original, but I immediately knew how I would do it. Would want to do it.
So what was your approach? How did you make it your own?
Well, we had a great big writer's room, and we all sort of, figured it out. The pilot episode was, you know, faithful to the original in that it had, you know, it set up the story and the thriller sort of as was. But I think I just like delved into my own sort of childhood and family and you know, just the very nature of setting it in Ireland gave us so much kind of for free, you know, because of well, I mean, family isn't specific to Ireland, but we're very good at making big families.
Yes.
Thanks, the Pope. But also, you know, that it just gave so much to the atmosphere of it. You know, it's like a small island that's sort of battered by the sea, and you know, it gave us sort of. You know, I was able to bring sort of religion into it more, and the idea of, well, you know, the prick being this sort of outsider, this sort of blow-in, you know, and a sort of outsider to Ireland, but also an outsider within the family itself, and just lots of little things like that. I remember in the writers' room, I just hung up all these pictures of all the places I sort of hung out when I was a youngster, because we knew we wanted to really focus on the sisters' bond and how it began and how it developed and how they were kind of everything for each other. So I just sort of used my own family kind of history for that, and it just sort of I mean, it was a difficult process, don't get me wrong, but it came together in a way that I don't think it would have if it had been a UK-based show. You know, there was something about the geography of Ireland and the sort of the history of it and everything that sort of fed into it.
Well, it obviously worked out well because season 1 won a BAFTA for Best Drama. It won a Peabody Award. It was nominated for 4 Emmys, 2 Writers Guild Awards, 2 Critics' Choice Awards. So not bad. Well done.
Yeah. Thank you.
And now season 2 is out in the world. It already has a PGA nomination and a Critics' Choice nomination.
Yeah.
So how did you approach season 2, knowing that you were starting with a clean slate without that template of the first season behind?
Well, we just sort of said to Apple, we'll give it a go. Like, they wanted to do more because people liked it. And
evidently,
yeah, and I didn't know if there was a story there, so we said to Apple, look, let's just do a week's writer's room and see what comes out of it, you know, but don't hold us to that, you know. If we feel like we haven't got something, let's, you know, just shake hands and say goodbye. I had the bones of the story while we were filming the first season.
You did.
So weirdly, considering it was sort of a limited, I guess, I just kind of had the idea of, I guess, you know, I suppose like lightning striking twice. Like, what would happen if Grace met someone else who was not a good person, but the fact that she'd sort of isolated herself for so long, you know, as a victim of abuse, she'd sort of gotten used to having secrets and hiding things from her family, and also this idea that, you know, women like Grace who've been through a relationship like that don't just walk into a healthy next relationship. You know, they're incredibly wounded and fragile and vulnerable, and that's unfortunately sort of very attractive to the wrong people. So the idea of her finding herself in that situation and meeting the wrong person, and how difficult it would be to tell her sisters, you know, that sort of it's happened again kind of thing. But then in the writer's room, so much more came out of it, like the character Angelica, and like loads of things that ended up in the second season, like even a lot of the visual stuff, like the racehorsing and the horse racing, racehorse racing, and the camogie, you know, the game that Blonde plays. Like, it was kind of coming to me in sort of, I had a lot of visual ideas, you know. It's weird. Like sometimes I think of the trailer before I think of the
Marketing
show.
must love you.
But I think it's a weird thing. It's sort of just, it kind of just sort of comes to you, and so I had this sort of like, I'd edited the trailer in my head, and I knew that I wanted to. You know, the idea of in the first season, like the 40-foot being this place where that was very, very specific to Ireland, but this almost kind of became this character in the first season. I wanted to find other sort of things that were very specific to Ireland and sort of introduce them to the world as well. So so sometimes ideas like that, you know, help other ideas sort of form. And you know, making it a lot about Blonde and a lot about, I guess, the sisters, the damage that the prick did, the damage that John Paul did wasn't just to Grace, it was to the whole family. And how do you just go back to normal, you know, when you killed a man? Like, how do you just like go back to life? And I figured out not easily. And so I thought, actually, I want to see that, you know, I want to show that it's not, you don't just sort of dust yourself down and get back to normal, you know, that it's a huge struggle and there's, you know, huge trauma there. And then it was just, you know, finding the right caper and, you know, sort of decoy villain. And but yeah, it was fun and I loved it. But it was really hard work. You know, it was a lot of moving pieces and a lot of going back to the drawing board and, you know, leaps of faith and stuff. But once we had it, you know, we knew we had it.
Did you know the ending in mind? Like, did you start from?
Oh yeah, I had the ending. Yeah, I had the ending. I was just talking about this yesterday. Hello. Oh, sorry. I thought that was. Oh my God, you look like my friend Alison. Oh wow, you are the spitting image of her. Yeah, I was talking. Sorry if I weirded you out. Hello. See you later. I had the ending, and weirdly, the ending. It was one of those days where everything was going wrong. So this ending that I'd sort of spent so long working on and writing, we had like this last minute. Like kick bollock scramble 20 minutes to film it in. And it was insane, but it was, honest to God, it was like it was like the gods were with us, you know. Everything just fell into place. We even had a drone, you know, we had a drone shot, which was our final shot, where you leave the sisters on that beachfront, and you know, when we scattered Grace's ashes, and so many things had to fall into place. But there was very little dialogue. I knew it was going to be a sort of, that we'd find the right piece of music, and that it would be this flashback to the sisters when they were younger. So I knew I had all that, but the other little bit, all the in between shots and that sort of thing of like family coming together, and them, even though they're saying goodbye to Grace, you sort of believe that they're going to be okay. You know, that they're still a family, and the new generation, and Becca's got her baby, and Blonde's there. But 20 minutes, lads, and
wow,
and it all just happened, you know.
Amazing.
Yeah, the hardest thing was holding it together, because it was so emotional. Because we were saying, oh God, I'm gonna get upset. We were saying goodbye to that character, but we were saying goodbye to the well, you know, the show, and I had lost my dad just like a few months earlier, so I was kind of saying goodbye to him, and it was like, God, hold it together, you know, keep the emotion in. And then at this the last moment was this, you know, the camera pan across all of us, and we were all in bits. But it was just like holding it together until that camera kind of got to you, and not like, you know, spunking your load too quickly. Yeah, that was mad. It ended up being a really, really beautiful shot, but I don't know how we did it. I mean, maybe we would have got a chance to go back, but it just, that particular venue and location, you know, everything was sort of, it would have been really tricky.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, it was meant to be.
So no season 3 then.
Oh, well, I mean, look, that's the thing. What we were saying goodbye to the show. We were. But, you know, I sort of said to Apple, like, it's not one of those shows where, you know, it's where, you know, we meet another baddie. Like, the reason why the season 2 worked is because it was everything that happened in season 1, you know, motivated it, you know. And you really, you know, you felt John Paul's presence and the impact of that. So if you did a season 3, it would have to be something completely different. And so I sort of said, look, if, you know, if with a bit of time, maybe thinking about the sort of next generation of it, you know, there's a possibility. So we're going to do like a very short writer's room at some point, and just to see if there's something there. But if not, I really think it's a good idea to leave it alone. You know, it's good to know when it's time to go. You know.
It must be a hard decision to make. I mean, you've created such a wonderful world, such a wonderful chemistry with these sisters.
Yeah.
You put a point on the ending.
Yeah.
But also, you know, we fell in love with this family.
That's the thing. I mean, well, and I fell in love with the actors as well. We all fell in love with each other. We were just out last night. We still have a WhatsApp group. No one can kill it. Like, no one. It's still like chugging along because no one wants to say goodbye. And I think that's really special, you know. And, you know, I'm sort of hoping to work with all of them again at some point. But that thing of what we were able to create together was really special. So that's hard to say goodbye to. And that's probably why I think it's worth having another think about it, you know.
No argument from this room, right? No. And you introduced a fabulous new character this season 2 in Fiona Shaw.
Yeah.
How did you get her to agree to sign on?
Just by making a fool of myself in front of her, really. Dervla and I went to meet her, and she'd loved the first season, and she'd read episode 1 of the second season. So we had to sort of, you know, like, just talk to her about what our plans were. But you know, when your mouth gets really dry, when you're so nervous and your brain is racing. And so suddenly I had to talk to her about what the second season was about when I had, you know, I was sort of outlining it at that point, but it was still very sort of up in the air and not everything had been figured out. But, you know, she asked me, so I just had to start talking. And it's sort of about halfway through, I could see her just sort of glaze over. And I was like, I've lost her. And but, you know, it was a great meeting. And I went away thinking, you know, I've probably screwed that up, but let's see what happens. And then I wrote her an email. And I talked a little bit, you know, a little bit more lucidly about some of my plans. But then I said, you know, if I'd pitched you the first season, you would have thought it sounded mental. You know, just will you come on this ride with us and trust us? And then she did. It was great.
And what a ride.
Yeah, what a ride. Oh my God, what a ride. She's so funny. She's so, I mean, I knew, have you seen Three Men and a Little Lady? I mean, how funny is she? She really, really I've said this a few times as well, but she really, really reminded me of Molly Shannon. She has her kind of hilarious physicality, comedic physicality. And of course we knew what an incredible dramatic actress she is. But the most amazing thing was that she got Angelica. You know, she was almost embarrassed about how much she understood and got her. Because she was like, she just wants to be friends with these girls. You know, she's sort of looking at these women and thinking, I didn't have that freedom. You know, how are they so comfortable with themselves and who they are and their bodies? And, you know, because, you know, she was Roger's sister, so we knew she was going to be a Northern Irish woman and she was going to be of a, you know, that little bit older, not a different generation, but, you know, and coming from a much more conservative background and someone who, you know, is riddled with complications due to their, you know, their their upbringing and what was kind of, I guess, expected of them when they were younger, and so has a broken marriage and is sort of, wielding her religion like a weapon, but underneath it all, like Roger says it in the show, like hurt people hurt. And she's looking for love. She's looking for love and friendship, and she found it in Grace, but she wanted too much, and it was sort of suffocating. So then, I mean, when Grace dies, she's sort of looking for answers as well. But it's that thing of, like, with the sisters, the grief sort of, they kind of go a bit crazy in how they're looking for answers. So, she does become this kind of decoy baddie, and she just relished it. I mean, how she even stirred a cup of tea, She was, oh my God, incredible. She was talking yesterday about when she, in episode 1, when she comes running into the house to Roger, and she goes, she's noticed that that John Paul's old place, has got cops around it, and she comes in, they're all in hazmat gear, like bloody ET has landed, and we. I mean, I just thought it was very funny how she performed it, but she reminded us all last night that she came rushing in so that she could turn around. She had her bike helmet on. We had this thing, like, I had this sort of Wicked Witch of the is it the east or the west? So I always wanted her on a bike. So she came rushing in with her helmet, and she wanted to get to a point in that particular location where the light was behind her, so that she could raise her finger up in the air for when she says ET has landed. and we were like, oh, that's what you did. I was like, how the hell did I not notice that? I mean, I sat in that edit for 6 months, but it was just at dinner last night. We're all a bit pissed, and she was like, yeah, I did the bloody ET finger thing.
Brilliant.
She's so playful. The last time I felt like that kind of exuberance, I did a film called There's Something About Jamie, and it was a very, very young cast. And when you work with really young people who aren't jaded in any way, they're just all like learning their crafts, and they're all like excited to be there and just ready for it. And it has this amazing effect on you where you're like, yeah, I'm going to park any of my problems and jadedness. I'm just going to really enjoy this because this is incredibly inspirational. That's how it feels working with Fiona Shaw.
It's amazing she still has
It's
that.
exactly that.
Right.
She plays all the time. She's not in character all the time. It's more fun than that. She sort of asks all her questions as Angelica, and she just sort of thinks aloud. So Angelica's thoughts, she's kind of like saying aloud to, and our director, Dervla Walsh, is also incredibly playful. So they would be having this bizarre Angelica sort of conversation with each other, where she's kind of working out what the character would do as she goes. And, just the fun every day. And, it's extraordinary to be around.
I think it's one of the things that what makes Bad Sisters so good is that it's obviously we're dealing with some really dark themes.
Yeah.
But there's such comedy and warmth and life to it. How do you strike that right balance?
Just every step along the way, you kind of have to be mindful of it. So in the writing of it, and then in the casting of it, who you go for, you kind of want them to be performers who are equally comfortable, dramatically and comedically, and also have are just limber, they can sort of move from one to the next not even within the one scene, within the one sentence. So you sort of get that right in casting, you're half the way there. But then, with your director needs to have that ability as well. And when you're filming it, to be constantly thinking about it. And then in the edit, that's when you can sort of go, oh no, we leaned too hard into the comedy there. We didn't really need that. You've got this other amazing opportunity to sort of adjust the tone, So I think the thing is to be really bold, to go for it and push it and get it all, and then sort of moderate it a bit when you're in the edit.
I mean, because that's life. Life is not one thing or the other.
Exactly.
Life is all of it.
Exactly. The thing with, especially, when we figured out that we were going to kill off Grace, like the heart of the first season, really, it's sort of, God, how can I sort of, how can I explain it? It's sort of, we were worried that in doing that, it was going to become a season devoid of, because there was so much grief that we would be dealing with. Would it take on this entirely different tone? And it couldn't, because it needed to be Bad Sisters. It needed to have that sort of balance with light and dark and comedy and drama. And then we sort of remembered that grief it fluctuates, and I had experienced it after writing it, but I'm so glad we went with that, because it's, 1 minute you're on the floor, and then the next minute you're laughing with your brothers and sisters, and you need that, because that's how you heal. And so we knew that we would have one pretty difficult episode, the episode 3, but even within that, when Angelica comes into the funeral and she's like, make it all about her, and that whole sort of grief thief thing, and but even
so true.
even within that, even within that episode, when the sisters start figuring out that something isn't right, and the caper comes in and the thriller comes in, and then after that, you just have to. Each character would deal with grief in a different way and in a different episode. So it's not like, it's not a grief fest, like episode 5 was Eva, my character, she's turning 50 and her sister's not there. So we were able with that sister to really like feel and embrace her grief then, Becca in episode 4, but in and around that we were able to continue the stupid stuff, the comedy of life. And but yeah, I remember at the time thinking it's nerve-wracking, but you need that balance.
For sure. As you look back over the course of the season, is there a moment you're proudest of? Jeepers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the boat sequence in episode 5. I mean, I can't tell you. I've never seen so much vomit. I mean, everyone got seasick. Everyone was destroyed. I mean, there was such a small boat that they were on that the girls didn't really have anyone there apart from, cameraman Simon, our director. Sarah Green used to work on a makeup counter, so she was doing everyone's makeup. Eva Thistle was literally green on the floor. I was in this ridiculous sort of gin palace, sort of following it around with with the producers and all the the monitors and all that. I was on the floor, dying with seasickness. But we had, when we were initially scheduling it, I think we had it in for 5 days, and we did it in 2. Because the budget couldn't, stretch, and but that we pulled that off, and it was funny, and it was unexpected, and we didn't drown Eve Hewson, and we yeah, I'm really proud of that. I think it looks amazing, and I think it's funny, and we had to intercut it with my story with Blonde Missing and Ian, and that sort of emotional sort of coming together at the end. And yeah, I was like, story wise, that was 2 big ideas kind of coming together, and pulling that off is, yeah, proud of that.
Pretty incredible. What do your sisters think of Bad Sisters?
Oh yeah, they love it. My eldest sister was really angry about me sleeping with my dead sister's husband though. I think she was like, don't you ever. No, she was really she was what's really funny is like, what the show really does is sort of, it's got a good sort of moral question in it in both seasons. And, those women, well, they don't in the end kill him, but, one of them does. It's people die. It's about murder. And the thing that really made people angry was well, one, that dog dying, and two, me sleeping with my sister's husband. But I mean, I was in a practical way, I was kind of worried about it because, you know, I spent a long time with this character, and she's a really strong character because she's had to be. I mean, she's brought that family up. She's dealt with, you know, rape. You know, she's dealt with her sister dying. She's dealt with her parents' death. She's come through it. She's dealing with menopause, you know, and yet she has this weak moment because again, this man catches her at a vulnerable time and takes advantage, and so it was sort of trusting that an audience would go with me and allow her to have this weak moment. And it didn't really matter if you hated her for it in that episode, but like kind of understand it in a way. But my sister was so angry with my character, and it's why she loved episode 7 so much, because Eva's sort of self-hatred, or that whole thing of like, I followed my fanny. You know, and the fact that she sort of wants to make it right and then is gung-ho with that. She loved that one, but she really couldn't deal with it. But for the most part, they love it. Yeah.
So you have a production company, you mentioned. What kind of projects do you look for? What makes you say yes to something that you want to take on and develop?
Oh, gosh. Anything that's a good story that's told in a way that I haven't seen before. You know, like I read a lot of good, solid scripts, but like reading something that has a voice that is incredibly singular, a singular point of view, I suppose, and that takes you somewhere unexpected. And we work a lot on sort of female-based stories, but not just that. I mean, I would say that's how we started out. That was our goal, was to bring up more sort of young female writers, and like we can continue to do that. We sort of branched out into boys as well.
The boys have their projects.
Yeah.
They're fine. I know you've got a spin-off, Amanda Land.
Yes.
How's that coming along? What interests you in a spin-off and revisiting a world that you've...
God, the spin-off is really interesting. Motherland is our show in the UK, and it's really it's one of the big UK comedies. And when we couldn't do that anymore, we were all like bereft. And so we thought we'll maybe find a way to create a show around the character of Amanda, who's played by Lucy Punch, and her mother, who's played by Joanna Lumley. And but you just don't know. You really don't know if it's gonna, because it's few and far between the sort of great spin-offs, right? I mean, there's Fraser and what else? What else? I mean, there's probably, is there?
Yeah.
Oh God, Better Call Saul. There's a few great ones, but it's really, really hard to pull off.
Hard to nail.
But no, it's great. It's sort of did even bigger figures than the original one. It's just a great character. Lucy Punch, Lucy Punch, an incredible, funny. I don't know. She's a lead actress and a character actress, but it's just a character who is. Trying to, who always wants something more, who's destined for better, she thinks. So it's a sort of, it's a sort of gift of a comedy character. And I think it was nerve-wracking for her as well, because she hadn't sort of played a lead before, and we were all absolutely shitting our pants. And then something happens, and it's a sort of chemistry thing. We put this great sort of ensemble cast around her, and people I think also just really wanted to laugh. There's sometimes where people really, really want like a hard comedy, so it does that. It's a really, really great hard comedy.
What haven't you done yet that you still want to do? What's on your bucket list?
What's on my bucket list? Well, we are branching into features ourselves, Merman. So I really would love to, to nail that, you know, we've made a couple of features and it's been wonderful, but just so we're a small independent production company, so we haven't got sort of endless dollars to, you know, to develop. We got lucky with our feature herself. It was just this incredible actress, writer, Claire Dunn, who just sent us a script, you know, unsolicited, which never happens because she's an Irish woman. I was like, okay, I'll read it. And we got very lucky that we paired up with Element, and you know, but you know, often it takes a lot longer. Development on films is just like years and years and years. So I really want that to sort of kick off, and you know, Merman US is now really sort of on a roll. We're making Vladimir. With Rachel Weisz. We start filming in Toronto in July. And so I want to kind of, yeah. I want to I want to do it all. That's what I want for myself. Just it all. Yeah.
More directing?
Yeah. I'd love to. I mean, I've had a feature in development for years now, and it's a tricky thing because it's so dependent on casting and sort of funding, and you know, but then you've got to go and make a living, you know. So I kind of dip back into TV, and then when I come out of a project, I'm, you know, back on the feature again. But yeah, hopefully I'm writing my first animation. Wow. And I mean, at the moment it's just a short, so yeah, I really want to see if I can do that. It's such a fun thing. It's my little sort of side project, you know, when I'm making a new show for HBO, and that's what I should be doing with all my time. But I have this little side project, which is an animation that I sort of dip into when I run out of ideas.
What advice do you have for people trying to break into the business? What have you learned that you wish you'd known when you were starting out?
I wish I'd known that you don't have to know it all, you know, before you really go for it. I think I was so convinced that I didn't have the whole kind of package, and I didn't sort of just take a chance. You know, I wasn't sort of prepared to fail, I think, you know. I mean, although you heard my origin story and it's a mess. so I don't know what's right or wrong anymore, but it's about tenacity, isn't it? It's about sort of when people say no, sort of going, great, what can I learn from that, and moving on to the next thing, and just continuing to push yourself. It's a slog, and it never stops being a slog. And I think as long as you know that, I don't think there's any particular tricks outside of you just got to keep going and keep pushing and keep not accepting no, you know? So much of it is hard work. I mean, obviously there's luck. There's a huge amount of luck. And talent definitely comes into it. But, you know, hard work is huge, I think. It's the biggest thing.
For sure. All right, I want to get to some of the audience questions. This comes from Andrew. For me, the pilots of Catastrophe and Bad Sisters are airtight and perfectly constructed.
Oh, thank you.
What are your must-dos for writers and creators to ensure that the first episode sets up the series and brings people back?
God, pilots are really hard. I mean, the fact that they have to set up the series and you've got to give an entertaining story as well. I think that's the thing. I think it's sort of like, don't you know, you can introduce characters and you can introduce a world with brevity. You know, you can do it succinctly, and you can do a lot in 3 lines. You know, don't think you have got to spend your pilot you know, giving too much introduction and backstory, or if you do, like, write it long and then get everything you want to say down in your first draft, and then like reduce it, because if you do all that work, you've got the world and you've got the characters, and then you know, you've done all that groundwork and headwork, and then you reduce it, and then you've got like space to, you know, develop the story, like create the situation and to find the cliffhanger and all that kind of thing that is the reason why people come back. I mean, it's really difficult now because there's so much TV and there's so much good TV, and often things that shouldn't have a cliffhanger. Have a cliffhanger because they're like, how can we keep you watching? Over here. But yeah, I think as long as your characters are compelling, I mean, spend a huge amount of time on your characters. I'd say, have a great idea, but then really sit down and do your work on your characters because that's everything.
How much do you write knowing how it's going to be aired, if it's going to be binged or episodic? Because that's a huge part of the pilot too, knowing if there's going to be an episode that's going to immediately follow it, or
that's right. I mean, you don't always know. I mean, when I did Pulling, we thought it would just the first episode would go out, and then the BBC decided to show episode 1 and 2. Probably because it was the first thing we ever wrote, and we really did not set up the the series in episode 1, so they thought, let's put out 2 as well. With Bad Sisters, I mean, that was something that we knew would go out weekly, and thank God it did, because that's it was word of mouth that got that series sort of that got it to catch on. With Catastrophe, it was really difficult because we knew it was going to go out weekly on Channel 4, but go out as a binge watch on Amazon. So you kind of there's no right answer really. You just have to write what's entertaining,
All right, so a good segue to the pilot question is the endings question from Cecily. So for the ending of Catastrophe, ominous or chill?
Oh, well, I guess it is a little ominous. But Rob had his idea of what happened, which is darker, and my idea is, they got back to the shore, otherwise what would have happened to the kids in the car? So, but what we wanted was, I mean, what was amazing was I was just, when I watched that episode air, and I never watch any of the episodes there, but it was going to be the last ever episode of Catastrophe, and I was expecting to feel like this huge grief. And at the time when Twitter was a friendly place to hang out, there was this sort of live tweeting thing of people talking about the ending, and there was such an amazing feeling of people are going to continue to talk about this. This isn't dead, because it sort of had a write your own ending, which is exactly what we wanted. Right. And so instead of me feeling like upset or depressed about it, I just this is amazing. This has got its own life. So I'm really glad we did it. We wanted to create a feeling more than anything, and we wanted to leave people sort of shocked talking about it. And so I don't really know how to answer your question.
All of the above.
It's a bit ominous, but also chill.
But to go back to the Twitter point, I mean, how do you feel about social media? I mean, obviously Twitter is its own thing, but, is it important for you? I mean, I know you're on, do you engage with audiences? Do you think it's a part of driving audiences to a show?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I think it's really helpful. I don't go on Twitter anymore. I know it's called something else. Ridiculous.
Not a letter.
So I can't even go. I tried with the first season of Bad Sisters, but I couldn't go back into that swamp for the second season, so I just left it. But with Instagram, yeah, I do use it as a bit of a marketing tool, and I don't know whether that's annoying or not. I mean, sometimes I use it for just fun connection with people, and sometimes for charity, or it's a good tool. But it's even Instagram can be a bit dark, so I don't really, I sort of have a quick look see what people are talking about, and then I kind of leave them to it. I just kind of put this stuff up there and then go away. Yeah.
Do you Google yourself or no?
Do I what?
Google yourself.
I have. I don't do it very often. I did it a lot when I was younger, which is weird because there was a lot less places to find stuff about yourself. But no, now I have the fear, and I'm also, if you can't go looking for good stuff if you're not prepared to see bad stuff. And I don't love bad stuff. No. It sort of gets under my skin, and, I mean, there's so much self-doubt and beating yourself up in this business anyway, that I kind of think it's, why put yourself through that?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think we kind of covered this, but Madeline wants to know what made you want to start writing material for yourself as an actor.
Yeah, just good roles for women, and also just a good role. You know, I feel like at that time I was getting some nice breaks and I was getting to do some nice work. But I mean, God knows what would have happened if I just, carried on sort of waiting to see what got offered me. I'm just like quite a practical person, and I like to, I like to work. So yeah, it was it was to get myself good roles, but it was also to have another job, to have another string to my bow, so I wasn't waiting around.
Is that advice you would offer to people trying to break into?
Oh my God, I would really recommend it. If you think you can write at all, you can probably write better than a lot of writers. I mean, I think actors bring so much to the script anyway. I mean, on any show I've ever done, it's ended up better after a discussion about that character, or they do so much. I say I am one of you, but you do so much work on that character. You have so many insights yourself, and I find that a lot of actors have a writer's brain. The way they figure out story, and sometimes I'm like embarrassed at stuff that I haven't figured out that they've sort of figured out for me. So I think if you have that at all, I think it's an amazing way to, even if it isn't something that you end up doing anything with, I think it makes you a better actor as well. Just working with words and story.
When you're an actor in someone else's show, are you giving notes? Are you trying to like poke your head in the writer's room, or can you like restrain yourself?
No, that's the whole beauty of it. I don't have to do any of that. But it's funny because people kind of think, or not expect it of you, but think that that's what you're going to do. And it's absolutely not. I mean, it's like a busman's holiday for me. Like I don't want to do that. Don't ask me anything. Just like
should point me to the trailer and craft services.
I'm so different when I'm in someone else's show. I'm just very daft and stupid and like,
I don't believe that for a second.
I know I enjoy it, and whereas like when I'm on one of mine, I'm thinking about everything. So and I'm always sort of writing in between, and I sort of see them over there having fun, and I'm sort of back, sort of huddled over a laptop. So like I really enjoy myself when I'm on someone else's thing.
Okay. Speaking of acting, this is, I think, from Lisa. Apologies if I misread your handwriting. I was so moved by your performance in Criminal. It was such a one-character driver role in a sense. Could you elaborate more on preparing for the role and your experience?
I didn't prepare for that role. I was coming back from LA actually. And I'd only got back the day before, and I was absolutely jet lagged. And I'd just come off I can't remember what it was, but I'd just come off a really big job. And the show's made by my friend Jim Field Smith, and he'd asked me to do it. And I kind of felt really intrigued at the idea of the whole show being about this one particular character and one particular crime. And we'd done a bit of work on the script before I went away. Actually, now I've just completely contradicted myself. but there were some elements of it that I thought, maybe we could work on that a little bit. And so I'd sort of, through doing that, felt like I'd sort of, connected with it. But it was one of those things where it was just like surprised me, and I was like, oh shit, we're doing this now. And yeah, I don't know. I just kind of, it was such an intense set, because it's just you in that chair surrounded by cops who were like interrogating you, that sort of did a lot of the work. And I kind of felt that I sort of knew that, that once I was there, I'd kind of get it. But yeah, I didn't prepare for it.
This is from Sabrina. At yesterday's screening of Bad Sisters, you mentioned how much more personal the auditioning process is in the UK versus here in the US. Do you feel as a showrunner, it's easier to get things greenlit over there versus here, especially as a woman?
No, it's not easier to get things greenlit. I don't think so. It's always really, really difficult. I mean, Amandaland was such a you know not a one-off, but it was so unusual that was so easy, you know, and that the BBC got behind it and they, you know, commissioned a few series of it, you know. But really, it's hard, and you're in a development slog. I mean, especially with drama, because it's such a commitment, you know, and there's a lot less money to make TV in the UK, and quite often you've got to get funding from another broadcaster, or you've got to bring a few in, and so, you know, it's not something they just sort of jump into at all. And it doesn't sort of matter if you've been around the block, by the way. It doesn't. It's, you know, there's a certain amount of trust, and that you know what you're doing, and but no, it's just as hard there as it is here. Yeah.
And in terms of, you know, is there anything you would take from the UK that you would bring to the US, or US that you would bring to the UK? I know that the systems are so different.
How do you mean? Like what?
Just in terms of, like, you know, they do shorter. Well, I guess here we're doing shorter episode runs too.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that we've sort of met in the middle.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's really sort of, you know, it's become much more similar. I think the well, I mean, like I said, that sort of casting process thing, I think it that be handier if it was a bit less kind of brutal here, because it shouldn't be such an it should be a good experience, right? It should be something that you're not dreading, because it's such a huge part of our lives. But yeah, I suppose, like, the idea of everything not needing a sort of, you know, rose tinted sort of happy ending. You guys love to just, like, we don't care. We don't care when things are just really out and out sort of dark, and, you know, we're kind of allowed to do that. And I think you shouldn't always sort of be good at your job and you know, have a happy ending where everything's sort of tied up in a nice neat bow. I think yeah, but that would be good. We need more of your money, though.
I don't know that we have it anymore.
I know, it's a really tricky time.
Sorry, it's this. Anyway, let's end on a happier note.
Yeah,
So, crystal ball, future. Like, what's your dream role? What's your dream project that you would want to do next? Money's no object. Dream cast.
Really?
Yes. Fantasy.
Oh God, just one of those great big sort of 80s movie inspired ensemble films with a ridiculous cast that you just kind of pinch yourself, you know, like one of those great, like they make great films in the 80s, didn't they? Yeah, something
Speaking
like
of
that.
money, no object.
yeah, exactly. Or, you know, a great big old sort of traditional kind of rom-com with yeah, I'd love to do that, something like that.
All right, casting directors, pay attention. All right, well, thank you so much. This was truly a pleasure and a delight. Thank you all so much for coming out.
Thanks very much. Thank you.